Welcome to the Nick Blevins Family Ministry Podcast. Our goal is to help you maximize your church's potential. You'll hear from top leaders in children's, student, and family ministry about the principles and practices they use. Now here's your host, Nick Blevins.
What's up, everybody? It's episode 151 of the podcast with Vince Parker of LifeChurch. Vince oversees student ministry for all of LifeChurch's locations, and we talk about how they do student ministry. What does that look like? They call it Switch. So we talk about student ministry at the campus. What does that look like week in, week out? How does Central, the team that he's a part of, help equip and resource those campus leaders? So whether you're in a multi-site church or not, you're going to love this episode because it's just a kind of a deep dive look into what student ministry looks like at LifeChurch. Before we jump into that, want to let you know about some webinars that we're hosting with Ministry Boost coming up. We've been talking about these. Specifically, you're probably going to be interested in the webinar about coaching. We're calling it Empowering Volunteers to Lead Like Staff. And even when you listen to this interview, you'll hear Vince talk about coaches and those roles and what they look like in student ministry. And you can tell they would not be able to do student ministry without these leaders. And so if you are looking to implement coaches in your ministry, recruit them, or maybe you have some, but you want to empower them even more and recruit more, you'll want to come take part in that webinar. It's Thursday, June 27th, 2 p.m. Eastern. You can sign up at ministryboost.org. Starting last week, I'm going to be sending a weekly email about the new podcast episode. I'll give you something exclusive in that email that you won't find in the post or in the interview. For this week, I'm going to give you my favorite student resource that's on the open website where you can get all of LifeChurch's resources. I'm going to tell you what my favorite one is that you could use with your student ministry and your students there. But to get that, you got to sign up in the email. You can go to the show notes at nickblevins.com/episode 151. And there you'll see a form where you can sign up to get that email. But afterwards, I'll tell you kind of 3 action steps I think you could take to make the most out of this interview. But let's go ahead now and jump into my conversation with Vince Parker about student ministry at LifeChurch. Today I'm talking with Vince Parker. Welcome to the podcast, Vince.
Oh, thanks, man. Glad to be here, man. It's an honor.
So tell us about you and your role at LifeChurch as we get started.
Sure thing. I've been on life staff at LifeChurch for 10 years now. Currently, I am the central ministry leader of Switch. And basically what that means is I oversee all of youth ministry for LifeChurch. So,
which is a pretty big responsibility.
Yes, currently right now, we're a multi-site church, and currently right now we are in 10 different states with 33 different locations.
And you got to say currently when it's LifeChurch because it could be like 34 next week or something like that, you know?
Yeah, I don't know when this podcast is going to air and what God is doing, but man, it's just amazing to be a part of it, and I'm so blessed.
So tell us a little bit. So you're the central director for student ministry, which you all call Switch there now, but what are a couple other roles you have been in at LifeChurch before you got to this role?
Okay. So when I started on staff just over 10 years ago, I was actually the associate youth pastor at one of our locations. And so I did that for about a year and a half, 2 years. And then I was blessed to actually go back to my hometown where I graduated high school. LifeChurch launched a location there. And so I was a youth pastor there, which is always neat to go back to high school and the junior high where you grew up at because everything's so much smaller. And then I was the associate campus pastor of youth ministry, so I'd really help the campus pastor there, support him, and did some things, but I still led youth at that particular location. And then I launched a location in Oklahoma City called our Broadway and Britton location. I was the campus pastor there, and so I did that for almost 4 years. And then one day, my current boss, Allie Evans, asked me if I'd be willing to interview and do the role I'm in now. And so what's cool about that is this role supports campus pastors and youth pastors from the site of youth ministry, and I've been both. And so I interviewed, got that role, and been doing it for a year and a half now.
Yeah, that probably is a really big bonus that you have been both a student pastor at the campus and a campus pastor, so you know what both are thinking, and I'm sure there's always tensions there and stuff like that. So that's really cool. So I want to hear all about like what student ministry is like at LifeChurch, both at the campus where most people are going to relate to it, right? But then also at Central for anybody who is in a multi-site church and can relate to that too. So, but tell us what a typical week is like for you in your role at LifeChurch.
Oh, okay. So for me, a typical week actually is rather varied. It's different each week to each week. So obviously meetings meeting with different youth pastors, meeting with different central ministry teams about the direction and where we're going with Switch and what does that look like. And then from there, I spend the majority of my time, probably 6 to 9 months ahead of where our campuses exist and live. So at the time of this recording, we're working on our central content team. It's actually working on getting everything ready for the fall semester of Switch. And so they're going to be prepared for that. They're excited for that. But I'm actually in spring planning what we're going to be doing. What does that look like? So then our content team, our creative team, can take all that information when they're done with planning for the fall and then create and work around that. So how many weeks are we having Switch? What weeks aren't we having Switch? What does it look like? What does the flow look like? What things are we pushing towards, working towards? What agendas are we doing?
Cool. So you spend a lot of your time spent with the content team, as you called it, like the team that's central that creates what then is exported to campuses. How much of your role, though, is also spent like influencing those campus student pastors? Is that part of your week too? Some of those meetings as well?
It is. So every week I call and meet with about 4 to 5 of our different campus youth pastors, talk to them, connecting to them, finding out what they're celebrating, what they're excited about, finding out what some of the things that are difficult or challenges they may be facing. So I do that every week, and it's just a different group of what's going on. Every week I also visit a campus location. So every week we have Switch on a Wednesday night. I actually am at a different campus location, just kind of getting a hands-on, eyes-on, seeing for myself, getting to hear the stories firsthand from the students, from the volunteers, from the people who are all involved. And then also following up with that youth pastor. How can I support you? What can I do for you? Talking to that campus pastor. So I do that every single week. And then also on a monthly basis, we gather all our youth pastors together. Now we use a video technology and do that over a call. And so planning that out, what vision, direction are we casting? How am I being the chief reminding officer? How am I taking all the information from 30 plus locations and making sure we're pointing in the right direction? What changes or shifts do we need to make based on what we're seeing?
That's good. I like chief reminding officer. I think the bigger an organization gets, the more important that role is, especially with 30 some locations and all that. So what does staffing look like for LifeChurch in the student realm at the campus and then also at Central? And if you use ratios, I'd love to hear them, but how does that work?
Sure. So I'll start with the campus. So currently, of the 33 locations, 30 of them have full-time student youth ministry. And any location that has full-time student youth ministry has a youth pastor. So all 3 of those locations have a youth pastor at them. And once they get to a certain point in time, right now, once they hit 250 students, they get an associate youth pastor. So what's cool about that is they're like a pipeline. It's someone who's being developed for when we launch a new location. And so that's cool. So that gives the youth pastor who's in that location the opportunity to develop someone and then the opportunity for someone to learn in the game as an associate youth pastor. So that's kind of what it looks like from a campus standpoint. What it looks like from a central standpoint, I'm under the umbrella of our next gen team at campus. And so at Central, sorry. And so I myself have an associate, and then I have a project leader that are on that central team. So the 3 of us help oversee, cast, lead the vision, direction for where Switch is going, youth ministry at LifeChurch. We also have a creative media team. And so on that creative media team are different parts and elements, from content writers to videos producers to graphic people. And different people on those teams actually make up what I would call the Switch creative team. They actually help produce the content, the graphics package, all those things that come out that youth pastors use throughout the year when it comes to student ministry.
Is that creative media team, are they dedicated student ministry, Switch, or they do other things at LifeChurch?
So they do other things at LifeChurch, but for the most part, they're dedicated to student ministry.
Gotcha. So total number, how many people work in Central for Switch, I'll call it?
I'll say 6 people total work for student ministry and Switch on various teams.
Yeah. So that's very lean. 6 people centrally. 33 campuses. And the other anybody else listening is thinking, wait a minute, you have one full-time staff person for 200 students, 250 students. Like, that's a lot. Now, a lot of it is because you do create things centrally that they don't have to do. They're just executing that. But the church would be pretty large. You could have a campus of 2,000 and still have one full-time student pastor, right? It seems like. And then they add that next one when it gets to 250 students. Is that right?
That is correct. And even sometimes it could be beyond 250 students. A lot of we're huge when it comes to utilizing leaders, volunteers. It's just a model and what we believe in our whole church. When a leader gets better, everyone gets better. And so one of the things that we've actually done to help support the youth pastor is our leadership structure for student ministry is actually set up the same way our paid campus staff ministry is set up. So if you think for LifeChurch, we have what we call a host team. Most churches call it a first impressions team. Mm-hmm. So we have a volunteer, a leader at every location that we call our switch host team coach. And they actually lead all the other volunteers who are part of making students feel welcome, making them feel engaged, talking to parents when they're dropping students off, outside, answering questions, serving water, tea, a bag of chips, whatever it may be occurring at that location. We have life groups at all our LifeChurch locations. And so we have a life groups pastor. And so, but at Switch, we have what we call a switch groups coach. And that switch groups coach operates in the same way. They're helping oversee, helping pour in, develop our switch small group leaders. And so we just discovered and felt it best use, and that helps support the youth pastor at every area and every facet of what's happening in Switch.
Is there also like a large group director, coach, something like that? So they got the group side, you got the host team side. Is there like a large group person for that too, or no?
So we have a couple other coaches. So one's our ops coach, Switch ops coach. They oversee all things operational for Switch. And then we also have a Switch experience coach. So they oversee all things that happen inside of our experience that night. So whether we're doing a game or whether it's a giant crowd game, whether it's a small from stage game, whether we're doing communion that week, they kind of help see and make sure that everything runs smoothly. So think of it like a producer behind the stage at the Grammys. Someone's there to make sure that everything runs well and everyone's where they need to be. And so that allows the youth pastor to keep their focus on students and leaders.
That's good. And those are all volunteer roles that we just talked about.
Those are all volunteer roles. And so, and underneath each of them, they all have some volunteer lead roles. So like if you're the Switch experience coach, you might have a lead game person. So this person is in charge of making sure all the supplies for the games are set up and right to go. They're in charge of making sure the students are pre-selected for the game. So we don't spend a ton of energy trying to figure out, hey, what students are going to play the game and point people out. They're in charge of like who's going to take the stuff on the stage, off the stage. So we have individual roles underneath them to help support them, and they pour into them.
That's good. So if you get an associate, like if your campus gets large enough, do they just kind of divide up some of that stuff between them, or is it very defined? Like, oh, at this point now you're doing this, I'm doing this. How does that work?
So we let them kind of define that. What we tell them not to do is to have an associate come in and take over a volunteer's role. We don't tell them to come in, okay, now you're the lead for all operational things. No, you might pour more into them. It just gives them an opportunity to be more relational, to pour in, to lead. And so we might let them lead 2 or 3 of those particular volunteers. And in turn, that might be 50 to 70 volunteers, but that's how they get wins. That's how they grow. That's how they develop. And at the beginning of that, they'll kind of rotate through that. And we teach volunteers to be like, hey, guess what? We're getting a new associate, and you get to be a part of helping them grow and get better, which actually makes volunteers excited and don't feel like someone's going to come in and take their place.
Sure. Now, I think most of us probably understand some of the stuff that is created centrally and then exported for campuses to use, teaching content, things like that. But what are some of the things, maybe even things we don't even think about, that you create centrally that you give to campuses and they kind of put it into practice? They make it happen.
Sure. So basically, the whole idea, the theme for the semester comes from our central team. They come up with what that looks like. And so from there, they create the graphics package that includes slides to invite people to church, slides to serve, slides for the games that leaders and students will be participating in that night. It includes the message notes. Some weeks it includes the message itself. So the entire message is pre-produced and it has the message for that. And sometimes even during a live speak, we help resource youth pastors with everything they need to be able to do that live speak. It includes the questions that our leaders are asked. It includes developmental resources for our leaders. And so what we try to do is set our youth pastors up to be successful so that they can lead and pastor people better at their campus and only handle the things that happen at their campus, and things that we can take care of, we provide them.
That's good. This might be a goofy question, but like, how does it work? Do you email it to them? Do they go log into a site somewhere? Like, how do they access this stuff?
So we have a couple different things we use. So like WeBrand allows you to create a graphic look, a package that you've created, like in Photoshop or something like that. Once you upload it, there are elements of it that allow you to change out like your name. So say it's a graphic slide for the youth pastor. Well, it allows them to go in, log into the site, and then they're able to say Vince Parker and type that in. And then it takes that same font, that same look, and puts it up there. Then they save it and they download it and they can put it in their ProPre. And then when they're on stage, their names. And so if they have volunteers and associate youth pastor, it's up there. So instead of creating each individual name slide, our central team, our graphics guy is amazing, will create that one and upload it. And so now they're set to go. We do use Dropbox. We do use a couple other things to kind of help keep people on track. But like WeBrand is an example of that. WebDam is another example where we upload all our files and all our messages to make that happen. But that's content that doesn't need to be adjusted. It's like, hey, here's this week's promo video. Hey, here's this week's serving promo video. Hey, here's this week's message.
That's good. That's helpful. So let's shift gears a little bit and talk about, in some ways, it's kind of like hiring student pastors. And you guys probably do that all the time. Am I right in saying that if I'm a campus student pastor at LifeChurch, is my direct report the campus pastor? It's not somebody at Central, right?
Correct. Your direct report is the campus pastor, and I'm the dotted line leader to the youth pastors.
Gotcha. And so, but I imagine though you have some help, maybe at times, hiring or weighing in, interviewing, I would imagine. So what do you look for in campus student pastors? What are some tips you can give us?
Man, as a whole in LifeChurch, man, we want to make sure that everyone that we bring into the organization fits into our culture. And so before we bring anyone in, it's all about, man, do you meet our aligning and sustaining values and attributes? And so like hard work ethic, integrity, things like that. So we have a pretty intensive interview process to get on staff at LifeChurch. And so there's a few phone screens, some testings before we even bring you in. I'm not going to give away all the details for that. But at the end of the day, it's making sure that people are aligning with your values. They have the same, God wired them with the same cultural values that the church has. Because, we've all been to like a store where you're like, I've heard Starbucks in Seattle is much different than the Starbucks in my home neighborhood, because again, that vision leaks and culture drifts. And so we want to make sure that we stay on top of that. That's
good. Now, when it comes to just student ministry, what makes a great student pastor at LifeChurch? I mean, you're probably, again, especially because you're giving them some things that they don't have to create. I imagine kind of the person you're looking for to lead at a campus, there's certain strengths you want them to have. Other ones you don't need them to be great content creators, because you're doing that. So are there a couple attributes or things, maybe even think of certain people that are student pastors at LifeChurch that's like, that's why they're good. This is what we want them to have and attributes and all that?
Oh, definitely number one is just the ability to lead people, the ability to pastor and care for people, the ability to work hard and drive hard. Even though we create stuff, the ability to be creative is still a great attribute for youth pastors. They don't have to create graphics, but be able to look at their particular situation because I have a global view of everything, but they have to have a local view of what it's like in their neighborhood and what are some specific things or how they can take the things that we've given them and make slight tweaks or adjustments to make them fit the audience that they're specifically speaking to, because every location is in a different place. LifeChurch is 24 years old, and so some of our locations are 24 years old, and some of our locations are 3 months old. Yep. And so they literally have to be able to know their audience. Some of our locations are high school heavy, some are middle school heavy, and we're in 10 different states from Albany to Rio Rancho, and the communities are different. The weather is different. I have locations who've had to close down because of snow, tornadoes, and I have locations who don't know snow nor tornadoes. Yeah. And so those are the things that help. That again, that drive, that work ethic, that integrity, those things that say, hey, man, I care about people. I love them. Be able to cast vision, be able to lead strong. So those are those things. Are you resilient? Are you able to push through? Because we all know in ministry, it's a marathon. It's not a sprint. Mm-hmm. And that ability to push through and to keep going. Do you have a positive attitude about how you look and see things? So those are just some examples.
That's good. So one thing everybody struggles with if you lead in ministry is recruiting volunteers and leaders. And then of course, in your case too, you've got these coach roles that are high level, and you've been in this role and you're helping, leaders who are in this role now. How do campus student pastors recruit and develop leaders? And how does Central help? Do they help at all? Is there things you all do centrally to help them? What does that look like?
So one of the things that we do to help is teach, especially some of our newer youth pastors, and even though it's been around a while, is my goal is to help them learn how to think, not give them exactly what to do, because we want them to grow in their leadership and not just simply do what we say. Mm-hmm. And at the end of the day, one of the best ways to recruit someone, it's much easier for me to go, is through a relationship. We say all the time that we are a relationship-based ministry. And so my goal is not to be like, hey, Nick, man, I need you to serve with this group of 5 6th grade boys because I have 5 extra 6th grade boys. But my deal is to get to know you, Nick, and be like, hey, man, there's something inside of you. And I believe, man, I've got some 6th grade boys. I think that, man, God wants to have something through you in their lives, but also wants to do something in your heart through them. And so it's all about people. I mean, relationships is the number one way to do it. And so it's talking, and it's also the other leaders who are a part of that. We encourage our leaders to say, you know what God's done in your life through you serving in Switch and how he's used you and how he's changed students and how your family's different. So we also encourage our leaders at the end of the day, man, go out and just invite one person. Mm-hmm. Invite them to be a part of this ministry. Invite them to be a part of what God is doing. Invite them to be a part of what he's doing in your own life. And so those are some of the ways that we do it. It's the number one way. And then people, when they see some exciting stuff happening and things going on, man, people just want to hop on and they just want to be a part of that. And so we do that.
That's good. Yeah. And it seems like the best, everybody that is in this world and recruits volunteers, the best recruitment is through relationship. It's not, the big call or anything like that. And I imagine too, to have one staff person, one campus student pastor leading for 200 students, it requires a lot of volunteers. You've really got to be a good recruiter, build a lot of relationships. Let's shift gears a little bit and talk about what Switch looks like at the campus. So Switch meets on Wednesday nights.
Yeah.
Is that, and tell us, is that middle school and high school? Are they separate or together? And then what does a typical Switch gathering look like? What are the program elements?
Sure. Switch is 6th through 12th grade. We meet on Wednesday nights, 2 hours. Like I said, we're a relational-based ministry. So our first 30 minutes is what I call relational chaos. So there's gaga pits, 9 square in the air, just a variety of things for students to do. But the idea is that this is when leaders get to talk to students and it feels a little bit more relaxed, a little bit more comfortable. It's like, hey, students are playing basketball. If you play basketball, go over there and play basketball with them and strike up a conversation. Because we have a lot of new students who come to our church. And so we love that. And we're excited about that. And then we have students who've been coming for a while and they're in a small group. But sometimes in small group, they feel a little reserved and don't talk. But that first 30 minutes is all about that. And then we have a 1 hour experience. And so we use the same space that our church uses on the weekend. And so in that 1 hour experience, what you'll see basically is a welcome. How are you doing? Glad you're here. And this is what you can expect tonight, full excitement and energy. And then we do what I like to call a Jimmy Fallon moment. It's like a skit or a game or just something. And most of the times the purpose of the game may not be to find a winner, but it's just to kind of bring that, oh my goodness, can you believe that just happened? I've got to tell my friend about this. I've got to be excited about this. And then we have worship every single week. And so from worship, we go to a message in which we challenge students. And then from there, we give students an opportunity to know who Jesus is every single week. We do an invite to know Jesus every single week. And then we end that with some announcements, and then we dismiss to our small groups. But again, we like to save those small groups meet at the end. They start at the beginning when we're doing that relational piece. And so then we have small groups for 30 minutes, and then we dismiss.
So did you say student ministry meets in the same auditorium that adults do?
It does. We use the same space.
Okay. Do you change it in any way? Considering I'm going to imagine it's a lot smaller. Even if you have 200 students, the campus might have 2,000. So maybe I don't even know, but maybe it seats 600-700. I'm not even sure. How does that work?
So we do make adjustments depending on the size. So some of our youth groups are larger. We reuse our buildings anywhere from 3 to 9 times on the weekend. And so based on that, even some of our larger locations who may not have as many students that meet 9 times as adults can fill that space. And so we can put up pipe and drape, or some of our locations have curtains they can use to close off the space and kind of keep that energy going. And so that's how we transform the space. We pull chairs to kind of help transform the space. So it's like, hey, everyone can't sit everywhere. So we'll pull some chairs and we'll transform the space that way. Transforming our lobbies looks different. When you throw up some 9 square in the air, some gaga pits, throw in some video games, we actually move where the kiosks that we use to put on water or snacks for the weekend, we kind of move those around in different places. And so some of our locations will do cereal bars randomly or give away grilled cheese sandwiches and just do the different things that when a student walks into this space that may come on the weekend, they go, man, this place was transformed for me. And so that includes anywhere from campuses that put up wall art to different things that make the space, hanging flags for representing some of the different switch groups that we have that meet. There's a ton of different things that each location can do, and we just kind of provide the resources and the options to do what works for them in their space.
That's awesome. Yeah, and I guess for some people, if they're not familiar, it'd be very common, right, to have like a LifeChurch location that is, let's say it's 2,000 in total average attendance, but it might be 6 or 7 services. And so each like the biggest service might have 500 or 600 people. So the auditorium may not be that large. It's not, you know what I mean? If you're then putting 100 or 200 students in there, it's not like you have to adapt it that much because you're already doing that. You probably have adult services that are only 200, right?
So it's the same principle. It's the same thing. So just giving people an opportunity that when they come in, they can feel the same energy, the same excitement, no matter what service they attend on the weekend or when they show up on Wednesday night. Yeah,
that's good. I had another question there I was thinking about. Oh, okay. So with your small groups at the end, you don't do small groups any other time during the week. It's all Wednesday night, large group, small group together. Is that right?
Correct. So we don't do organized from a church perspective small groups. What we do is we tell our leaders and our youth pastors, let them know that, hey, we're a 168-hour-a-week ministry. We just happen to meet in a building 2 hours a week. And so phone calls, texts, Instagram DMs, whatever you can do to connect with your students, whether it's going to football games, basketball tournaments, ballet performances, whatever it is, the goal is that we want our students to meet and do life together and not just within this 2-hour window context, but on a continual basis.
That's good. And you said, I didn't know this, that you every week invite students to follow Jesus, present the gospel. What does that look like? And like, how do they, how do you invite them to respond? I mean, I imagine, you're doing it every week. You've probably got some parts of it that are consistent. How does that work?
Okay. So let's just say this particular week, we're doing a message about courage. The youth pastor gets done preaching the message. He'll do a first call to action. Like, hey, have you not been showing courage in your walk with faith? Are you a different person from when you're at church than when you're at school? You need to show more courage if that's you. Then we invite students to raise their hands so we can pray for them. And then after they do that, we present the gospel. We tell the story of who Jesus is and what he did and why that's important and why that matters. And at the end of that, then we give them a chance to know Jesus and raise their hand and pray with them. And then at the end of that, we invite them to what we have, what's next. We believe that getting to know Jesus is just the start. It's not just the end, but it's the start. And so we have what's next groups that meet every week for students who get to know Jesus, where we give them resources and walk with them and have someone who can mentor them through these first few phases of that. So that's someone who's specifically designed and has been led and trained to walk with the kid. You just know Jesus. Let's understand what that means and what are some things that you can do and what does it look like to be different and what your friend experienced 3 weeks ago when they made this decision may not look the same for you, but know that you've made the same decision and Jesus loves you both, and walk with them through that. And so we have reading plans that our leaders can do with them. We give them worship music. We give them some cool swag that they can take with them. And then, yeah.
How long is what's next? Is it multiple weeks, almost like a group? Does it meet at the same time or different?
So it kind of varies from location to location, but it's one time inside the building on the day you make that decision. And then what our leaders have done, they have anywhere from 3 to 6 week follow-up things that the leaders are doing with the students, whether it's texting a student or it's like, hey guys, what we're going to do is you've made that decision. We're going to read this Bible reading plans on YouVersion Bible reading app with plans with friends. And so that leader will hop in and invite all of them to join this reading plan. So there's like a sense of accountability. And there's, if you've ever done the YouVersion plans with friends, at the end of the day, after you get done doing the reading, there's a place where you can chat and talk about, oh, what did that mean to you? This is what it meant to me. Then they'll do like a group text with them where they'll follow up and be like, hey, okay, how was that first week? How was it when you went back to school? Because you kind of told me your story about, man, things are kind of rough at home and your parents don't believe, or your parents do believe. What were your parents? What was their excitement like? And so that follow up looks like, and then we connect them back to their small group leader and let their small group leader know as well.
That's good. I actually jumped on open.life.church, which everybody should go to because that's where y'all give away free resources.
Yes.
I started to look to see if there's something on here about what's next. That's great. I love that you've got it. You're inviting them every week, but it's also you've thought about how do I help them. They've made this decision, not just, hey, that's awesome, let's celebrate, party in heaven, and then nobody pays attention. But you've thought through the weeks after that. How do you grow this young faith? That's awesome.
Yeah, and that's the goal. Again, we know making a decision for Jesus is the greatest decision you'll ever make, but we also know it's just the beginning of something special.
So I don't know how much this is done centrally, but again, knowing Life.Church is like I do, I wonder if there's some kind of consistency in terms of how a student pastor at the campus knows what success is. Like how do they know if they're doing well? Is it number of students? Is it students that are making decisions? Is it more the stories that comes out of it? Is it the volunteers? So what does it look like for a student pastor at Life.Church at the campus to know if they're succeeding or not? How's that determined?
Yeah. It looks different for each individual youth pastor. It just really depends on the season that they're in. If you're our oldest location, you've been around forever, man, there's a ton of students coming, but it's got to be more than there's a ton of students coming. It's like, what do those stories look like? How many students are serving on the weekend? How many students are leading groups inside of their school and they're hosting small groups inside their school? What does it look like when it comes to how many leaders you have coming on a consistent basis? And so there's a lot of different things that could determine what success. For example, I remember early on for myself, I would get excited for the first couple of years because I would be like, man, I just onboarded 30 new leaders over the summer. I'm ready to kick off. And my campus pastor at the time would be like, man, that's great. So that means you have like 80 leaders now. And I'd be like, no, I'm still at 50. And he'd be like, but you were at 50 last time and you just onboarded. He'd be like, what happened? Well, 30 of them just didn't come back. And so, yeah, I might be winning when it comes to be able to wow people and recruit people, but I had a backdoor problem. And so where for some youth pastors we might have, they don't have a backdoor problem. They've got 75 great leaders, and this semester they added one. Now they have 76, but they don't have a welcoming front door. They're not out there recruiting, inviting people to be a part of the ministry. So for each time and season looks different, but there are some data points that we look at. So leaders, students serving. But the stories are key because, like you said, we're a relational-based ministry. And based upon that, people need to know that, man, people matter to God, right? And when you see the works that people are doing, people tell people, right? Like when I went and saw Avengers Endgame, it was amazing. I loved it. I told everyone. I didn't do any spoilers, but I told everyone, go see it. And it's like when God changed your life, you've told everyone, like, oh my goodness, God changed my life. And it happened when I was going to this amazing church. And I got to invite you to be a part of it. And so you'll see some numbers things, some indications happen through that way. And so those are some ways that we can see wins, whether that's the number of students who show up and how are your students doing inviting? How are your leaders doing at inviting other leaders at bringing people on? How are you doing at recruiting? Or again, to go back to what happened to me, you brought on 30 new people. Congratulations. High five. I love it. But you were at 50 and you're still at 50. So what happened to those other 30? Because we want to make sure that we've been given a responsibility as youth pastors to steward the leaders that are part of our ministry. Switch exists for students, but it couldn't happen without leaders. And so God's entrusted these people in your care for you to pastor them, not just for them to lead a small group or pass out a bag of chips. And so there's a responsibility behind that. And so when youth pastors understand that, again, it's different wins in different seasons, but that's kind of what some of those things look like.
Is most of that driven from the campus pastor leading the student pastor? I mean, is that who they're talking through? Hey, what is success? Am I succeeding? Where can I grow? Or do you at Central too, with some influence there, help them, figure out what is success and how are they doing and how can they grow?
So we help them. And what I do is set up, and when I talk to campus pastors and I know where they're at, we kind of look for where does growth come from that. So let's just say we launch a new location. We don't know how many students are going to show up. We don't know any of that. And so success for them is going, okay, I need you to be prepared for whatever God's going to do. Are you going to be prepared for whatever God's going to do? So on the weekends, if the campus launches in the middle of April, but we're not going to have switch till August when school starts back, between August and how many people did you talk to and get excited about joining the ministry? How many students that were in the lobby did you talk to get excited about being a part of the ministry? And if you're like, well, the campus pastor hasn't said anything from stage, then you're like, well, that's, I get you thinking. It's just not in line with what we're talking about and what we're doing. And so conversations with campus pastors like, hey, I think Bob's doing great. And this is what I'm seeing. Since Bob's been here, the ministry has grown. The leaders are more consistent. I can tell you how many times a student comes on average. They're coming on average more. I can tell you how many new students are coming every week. I can tell you how many of those new students are coming back or if they're not coming back. And so based on all that information and data, you can let a campus pastor know. You can show up on a Wednesday night and be like, you know what? I see all the right things happening here. And I'm excited because, man, what God's doing here is amazing. And they're being set up for success for long haul, or vice versa, the conversations you don't like to have, but they're necessary. So here's the deal. As I am a parent, but I don't know if I want to drop my kid off here because it doesn't feel safe. All your leaders that are here, you got a lot, but all they do is talk to each other. It's almost like it's like a life group for leaders, and the students are secondary. Yeah. And so there's a host of different things that go into that, but you got to learn that what might be a win and seem like a win for everyone, especially a multi-site on that particular, doesn't mean it's a win for that location.
That's good. That's one of the things, like all of this is kind of a reminder of like one of the things I love about LifeChurch. The more I learn about LifeChurch is data matters. So you track a lot of data and you use it to make good decisions. Relationships matter most. So that's like the biggest thing. And then everything is individualized, personalized, whatever. It's not like just a copy. Because I think one of the things I love about LifeChurch too is that you're multi-site. There's a lot of systems that you just replicate. Just copy, run this play, which is great. But at the same time, you have this other element of let's individualize it for each person, for each campus, for each student ministry, for each season. And that's great. That's probably part of the success. You can't just copy paste. So even the example you gave there, it's like, here's how we're going to help that person grow over the next 6 months, or here's what the goals should be for them, which is not the same as for anybody else. I love that. That's awesome. Cool. Well, that's helpful. I like getting a good picture of like And I don't know if I've ever had that detail of like how LifeChurch student ministry works, what does Switch look like during the week? How does the Central help campus, all that? How can people connect with you if they have any questions or want to follow on social media or anything like that?
Sure. On Instagram, I'm Vince L. Parker. And on Twitter, I'm Vince Parker. You can connect me with there, or feel free to email me at vince.parker@life.church. Man, I'd love to connect. Love talking student ministry.
Cool. Well, Vince, this was really helpful. Thanks for coming on the podcast.
Oh, man, it's been an honor, Nick. Appreciate you having me here.
Well, that was a lot of fun. I enjoyed getting to hear more about LifeChurch student ministry. There's a lot that I do know about it, but I learned a lot more in this conversation with Vince for sure. Here are a few action items I think of coming out of that interview. One would be to draw up your team structure. So as you heard Vince talk about what that looks like at the campus, there was leadership, there were coaches, there were, people, volunteers who were leading in big ways, and that's what makes it work. That's why they can have one student pastor for 200 or 250 students. Plus, because they're multi-site and they can resource that from Central, but still, you need volunteers to be able to pull that off, and they have to lead in a big way. So another action step would be draw your team structure, and maybe you're going to draw the one you want to have, not the one you have now. And then action step 2 would be to recruit coaches over some specific areas. And again, you might want to take part in that webinar with Ministry Boost on June 27th. Just go to ministryboost.org/webinars. But you want to recruit a coach over that area. And then the third action step, which is an easy one I recommend you do right away, is to visit open.life.church. That's where all those resources are. And if you subscribe to my email list, I'll tell you about my favorite open resource for student ministry. It's actually my favorite resource because I've used it with adults to help recruit coaches. Actually, I've done it for other things too. It's all about discovering your gifts and your passions, how God's wired you. They did a student ministry series on it, and that's my favorite one, and I'll share that with you in the email. If you don't currently subscribe to my email list, just go to nickblevins.com/episode 151, where you'll find the notes for this podcast episode and a form where you could subscribe to get those updates. So thanks for listening. I hope this is helpful. I hope those resources are helpful for you and your student ministry. We are going to have Justin Edge, who leads kids ministry at LifeChurch, on in a future episode in just a few weeks. So if you have responsibility there, if someone in your staff leads in kids ministry, be sure to share that episode with them. It'll be very similar, kind of a behind the scenes look at what that looks like at LifeChurch. So thanks for listening. Hope it was helpful, and I'll catch you next time on the Family Ministry Podcast.
Thanks for listening to the Nick Blevins Family Ministry Podcast. We hope this helps you maximize your church's potential. We would love to hear stories of how you apply what you've learned. You can do that by leaving a comment on iTunes or in the show notes at nickblevins.com.